Well, welcome back to Have Bronco Will Travel. I'm John Webb, and this is going to be the first episode where we actually get our hands dirty and get inside this 1979 Ford Bronco. Now, the objective of today, which may actually be several days, is to get everything out of the cab of this vehicle. So that's going to include some aftermarket stuff that the previous owner installed, such as some aftermarket stereos and some handles that they put on the doors. But the real objective here is to get out the two front bucket seats for the passenger and driver's side, to get out the rear bench seat, and to also remove the female adapters for the front seat buckles. Now, to do this, we're going to need a few tools. First of all, to get the two bucket seats out, we are going to need a 9/16 adapter for a hex wrench. Now, this is bolted in each seat with 4 bolts, all of 9/16, and you can either use a hex wrench, not a hex wrench, my apologies. You can use a ratchet wrench. In this case would be a 1/4 inch ratchet wrench. Or if you want, you can also use a ratcheted crescent wrench in the 9/16 size. So we're going to go ahead and do that. Once we're done with that, we're going to get the seat buckles out. Now, to get the seat buckles out, you're going to need a T50 Torx adapter, which kind of has a star head. And again, we will be using the ratcheting wrench at 1/4 inch to get that out. Now, once we get that out, then we're going to go back to the bench seat, which is bolted in with 4 3/4 inch bolts. So again, we will be using a ratcheting wrench with the correct adapter. Now, for everything that's bolted in here, now to be fair, I don't have the tech specs yet. I'm working on getting those, but I am expecting anything having to do with the seats or the seat belts is probably considered safety critical, and as a result is going to have a higher torque setting, making it difficult to get out. In addition, this vehicle has probably been sitting for around 20 years in the open environment. So I'm also expecting a lot of rust that's going to help cement these bolts in place. For that reason, whenever I'm going to remove a bolt, before I use this wrench right here and do something that can over torque the teeth on this, I'm going to go ahead and break out a breaker bar. So a lot of this stuff, I'm going to be able to use a 3/4 inch breaker bar. But for some stuff, especially the 3/4 inch bolts, I might have to go to the 1/2 inch breaker bar. So keep that in mind as you're doing that, is to use a breaker bar first, and after you've used a breaker bar, then you can use other tools that have let's just say more fragile components. In addition, you're probably going to have to use some type of a penetration fluid like WD-40. So a lot of these bolts, I'm going to spray them down. What you're going to see in a video that might just be 30 minutes might actually take several days, and spraying them down several times to get them loosened up. So be prepared. If you do this with your vehicle, this could take a while. Now, once I get everything out of the vehicle, then I'm going to go ahead and need a pair of box cutters. Now, what I'm going to be using this for is to cut out all of the carpeting, cut out all the molding, all of the matting, everything else. Now, that leads to the next problem. As I mentioned before, this vehicle has been sitting for a long time. When you're doing this work, you always want to use the utmost safety. So one thing you absolutely should have is either a ventilator or a mask, because I do know that things like mice, probably other creatures have been in here. What ends up happening is you end up having environments where diseases can spread like that. Hantavirus is the one that you're probably the most concerned with. Now, the probability is very, very small, but hantavirus is a real thing, especially in the American Southwest. In addition, we've recently seen a cruise ship in the Pacific kind of come down with cases of hantavirus. So always use a mask if the vehicle is in a very dirty state. And to that end, you're also going to want to use nitrile gloves when you're touching anything. So that's what we're going to do today. However, before we go any further, I'm just going to kind of caveat, there's been a few friends of mine who are watching these videos who also know that I have a whiskey collection. So they've asked if I would mind showcasing some of the whiskeys and discussing them. Now, admittedly, this is an automotive show, not a whiskey tasting show, but they do kind of go hand in hand. So I'm going to start doing that today, and today I'm going to be highlighting the Wyoming whiskey. Wyoming whiskey is a relatively new distillery based, I think, on the east side of Wyoming, and it's an incredibly good whiskey, especially at the price point. Now, this one called the Outrider is a rye whiskey, but it's also a bourbon. Now, being a bourbon means it's at least 51% corn mash, and it also means it's brewed in the United States. Being a rye whiskey means it's going to be a sweeter whiskey. So this is one of those whiskeys that's a bit floral and a little sweet on the nose. It's very sweet on the palate, and it has a lot of spice when it's going down. So this is kind of a good entry point whiskey, probably about $50 or $60. They also sell other whiskeys that go for $300 or $400, they're incredibly good. So you will see me pouring a glass of this today, and in addition, you will see me sipping it. However, I'm not going to have this near the vehicle, which I'm cleaning at the time, just for safety reasons. So anyways, we'll get going on the video. Now, one other thing, and this is a full disclosure, I've already shot about half this video. Now, the problem I kind of realized is I was shooting it where I was just taking everything out, and I was going to do it as a time-lapse video, and it would just be a nice montage. But I realized that's not what I want these videos to be. I want these videos to be tutorials, and to be honest, I'm going to make a lot of mistakes, and I want to make them in front of you so you can see what not to do as much as you can see what to do. So to that note, what we're going to do now is we're going to go take a look at the process for removing some of the seats that I've already removed and kind of highlight the functionality of the seats and the process for getting them out. So with that said, let's go over right now and take a look at the bucket seats that I've already removed. Okay, here we are now with the driver's side bucket seats. Now the first thing I want to mention is that this is a standard bucket seat. Now you could order the second generation Bronco with this, or you could order it with the high back captain's chairs bucket seats, or you could have just a bench seat across the entire front. Now for the standard bucket seats, one thing that would surprise most people is the passenger side and driver's side seats do not have the same designs, and they don't have the same sets of functionality. So in this case, the driver's side, you have a couple things you can do with it. So number one is you can slide it back and forth in the rails to get closer to or further away from the accelerator. And you can do that with a lever right here. So you can maybe see underneath my hand here, you can pull this lever towards this direction. And once you pull it that direction, you can slide this seat forwards and backwards. Now the other functionality you have with that back here is there's an adapter that you can pull up, a lever. And once you do that, the seat can pivot forwards or backwards. And you can kind of push it back to lock it totally in. Now that's all of the functionality that you have with the driver's side seat. However, you do not need to modify any of these things to gain access to the bolts. The bolts that keep this in the vehicle are 2 in the front and 2 in the back, and they're pretty easy just to go ahead and take out and get the seat out of the vehicle. Now let's go ahead and move over to the passenger side seat and talk about those differences. All right, so here we are right now with the passenger side bucket seat. Now one thing I should have mentioned at the last seat is you can understand the functionality of these seats by looking at the user's manual. Now in the user's manual, everything you need to know about these seats can be found out on page 38 and page 39. Now, one thing about this is, unlike the driver's side seat, it has no functionality for the comfort of the passenger in this seat. The only thing this seat can do is completely pivot all the way forward or all the way back. The reason that exists is because this is a 2-door vehicle. If a passenger wants to enter the vehicle, it was designed such that they would enter from the passenger side, regardless of whether they sat in the front or the back seat. So to make clearance for passengers to get into the back seat, this entire seat will swivel forward, allowing access into the back. Now the way you would do that, and I do apologize, the seat is broken right now, is right down here you see this slot. There would be a piece of metal with a plastic adapter providing a lever arm coming out right here that you could just flip backwards, and it would allow the entire seat to come forward. This is something I need to fix, and it took a lot of effort to get that to work well enough just to get this seat out of the vehicle. However, unlike the driver's side vehicle, to get this out of the vehicle, the driver's side seat, to get this out of the vehicle, you do have to pivot the entire seat forward for one reason. One of the 4 bolts is directly underneath here, and there is not enough clearance in there to put a ratchet wrench. Now you can use a ratcheting crescent wrench since it's smaller, but by the time you pull the entire bolt out, you still have to have clearance to lift the wrench up and pull it out, and there's not enough clearance for that. So to get this out of the vehicle, you have to pivot all the way forward, then you can get to the 2 back and the 2 front bolts. Now just for clarity, when I got this one out, it only had 3 bolts, so I'm going to have to find the 4th bolt from a vendor someplace. Now, let's go ahead and take a look at the bench seat. The bench seat is still in the vehicle. I'm having some issues with the bolts, but it does give us an opportunity to see how it exists in the vehicle. So let's go ahead and move over and take a look at that. Okay, so here I am now in the Bronco. I'm quickly violating my own rule by not having a mask on, but I'm doing that so I can talk. Now, there are no real adjustments for passenger comfort on the rear bench seat. However, there is an adjustment to give you more storage space. So haven't measured it, but it looks like there's about 3.5 to maybe 4 feet of space between this seat and the tailgate. If you want to make more space for cargo, there is a mechanism by which you can fold this seat forward so you can provide more space. So the first thing you're going to do is you're going to look for a latch on the passenger side of the vehicle, on the side of it, that allows you to pivot this entire thing down. So this seat on top of this one, the cushions. And then there's a latch at the very bottom that you can pull up that would allow you to move the entire assembly forward. So let me demonstrate. So I folded it down, and then there's a latch at the center. I'm going to pull it up, and there it is. Now, once I do that, I actually do have access to the rear bolts of this entire assembly. So got that out, and then once you have this, there's a quick latch that you can pull on both sides of this if you want to remove the seat. So we're going to go ahead and get busy on that, getting the seat out, and then we're going to work on getting the brackets out. So without any further ado, let's actually get to work on this vehicle. All right, so we're back in the vehicle now. I've got the seat out. I want to highlight a few things to you. So what you're looking at right now is the mounting bracket on the driver's side for the rear bench seat. So what you can see here is there's a spring right here, and then back here there's a bolt hole. So I've already taken the bolt out of this hole, and it's the same on the other side. Now this spring has another bolt that's right down inside of it, and so that causes some problems. Now my initial thought was clearly they wanted you to have access to that, so there was probably a way to twist or pull this spring off, but that doesn't appear to be the case. It looks like this is actually permanently welded in, probably for safety reasons, but it causes problems to access this bolt down here. So the only way you can get to this 3/4 inch bolt is if you have a deep socket. Now ideally, because this is really torqued in there, I would like to have an impact socket, but you can't fit one in there. So that causes challenges. You're going to have to use a torque, not a torque bar, but a breaker bar. But when you have a breaker bar and it's higher up here, because that's how deep the socket is, it actually wiggles a lot and it's harder to keep it on that screw. So I'm having a real problem getting this bolt out, and I'm trying to add a lot of penetrant to that. And I may have to do this for a couple more days, but if I can't get to it, I'm going to have a couple options. Option one is try and preserve the bracket as is. And I do want to preserve as much about the vehicle, and then just drill that bolt out and then go find another bolt if I can. The other option is just hack this off, cut the spring, and I can probably use a shallow socket, which will make it easier to get into that. So don't know yet, but I do think I am going to consider coming back and redesigning and rebuilding this bracket. So I'd like to make a bracket where you can actually remove the spring, and I have to kind of investigate based on the tech manuals what the rationale for this is. I believe it is probably permanently in place for safety reasons. You don't want it coming off in a crash or a bump, but there may be ways to get around that to design this so that you can, remove this spring to make it easier to remove this bracket. So that said, removing this bracket and the equivalent bracket on the other side is the last things I have to do. Then everything's out of the vehicle and I will start cutting everything out. So we'll get to work on that and see if I can preserve both brackets. Let's get going. All right, managed to get the brackets out. I kind of did end up learning that these are separate, but the problem is you have to remove the bolts in order to remove the springs, but I kind of need to remove the springs to get to the bolts. So it's still something I may look at going back and redesigning. Now I'm going to go ahead and clean these in the ultrasonic cleaner. You will notice this one here has been deformed. If it's got plastic deformation in there, that's a safety issue. So I'll still go ahead and clean it, but this is probably going to end up being replaced. I think this one is serviceable. We'll get it cleaned up and take a look at it and find out. Now the one thing that was interesting, and I've already found 2 of these, and I suspect there's going to be more when I start cleaning out the carpeting, is I found this. This is a 3030 shell. Definitely looks like it's been in there for a long time. So tomorrow I'm going to try and make time to take this to the local gun dealer and see if I can dispose of these. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and get the camera set up to kind of start showing the process of cleaning all of the carpeting out of the vehicle. All right, you probably just saw a 6 or 7 second long time-lapse video. That video was meant to be probably about a 2 or 3 minute long video displaying the whole process of me getting everything out of this pickup truck or Bronco, whatever you want to call it. Now, what ended up happening was, as I pulled all the carpet out, which you saw, you start exposing the area that's underneath here. Now, on this side and the same on the other side, there's a cardboard divider that gets placed right here to kind of protect this recessed area back in there. However, as I got to that, I could see that there was a lot of debris overflowing the edges of that cardboard divider, which was a clear indicator that some field mice had set up middens inside of this pickup truck. Now, for those of you who are not aware, a midden is essentially a nest for mice. Now, it's where they pull in all the debris that they're going to go to sleep on and live on, but they also go to the bathroom in there, and that's a vector for diseases. So once I discovered that, it was kind of an all hands on deck, everything stop the filming, and focus on getting all that out of the vehicle and completely disinfecting the vehicle. So once that happened, what I did is I stopped. All food and drink that was in the garage had to be thrown away. No more food and drink allowed in the garage at all. Needed to make sure I was wearing long sleeves. I already had a mask on, I had gloves on, but I needed eye protection. And once that happened and I pull these off, there's no stopping until it's completely out and cleaned and disinfected. So I pulled all of that off. I had to use gloves, get all that debris out into trash bags, immediately take it to the dump. The next thing is I had to spray disinfectant in all these corners. And as soon as I knew the place was disinfected, then I had to start pressure washing the vehicle out. Now, pressure washing is kind of an interesting thing in this vehicle because you have here, same over here, and there are two in the front. There are body access points. Now, underneath these body access points, there is a hollow cavity. So if you pressure wash this, you don't want any moisture getting inside of there. So what I had to do was take plastic sheets and duct tape them down, the same thing in the front. And I had to pressure wash the whole vehicle, pressure washing around those areas. But once I completed the pressure washing process, I can't speak today for some reason, I took the plastic off these body access locations, and then I manually scrubbed these locations. Now I'm at the point where the vehicle is completely cleaned out, and with a few exceptions like the seatbelt covers for the male end of the front side, everything is out of the vehicle. It's cleaned, it's disinfected. I no longer have to wear gloves or a mask to enter the vehicle. And in addition, I can see the state of the sheet metal. Now, what surprised me is on the back side, what you're looking at right now, the sheet metal is in incredibly good condition. I am very, very happy with what I see. Now, there were a few locations where there was some surface rust. Most of that came off with a rag as I was scrubbing it down. On that side of the vehicle in the rear corner, there is some scaled rust that I'm going to have to sand off, but everything back here looks in really good condition. Now, there are a few dents, like there's a dent right here that I'm looking at on the wheel well. There's kind of a dent on the other side as well. Nothing that can't be pounded out, so I'm pretty happy with that. A few more things will happen in the future. I got to take these sections off. There's a few sections in the back, this running board that will come off. I can't take it off now because I need to be able to pull the vehicle forward so that I can open the tailgate. I don't have enough room in my garage, and I got to get the Bronco working to do that. So that will happen at a later date. Now, everything is looking really good in the back. There's a few areas when it comes to how this center plate was welded that I think may need to be redone. It's not that it's not in the condition it was meant to be in. I just think it could be a better quality weld. So we'll look at that when we get there. However, while everything is great here, the front of the vehicle is a little bit of a different story. So let's go ahead and take a look. Okay, what you're looking at right now is the center portion of the vehicle. This is where your feet would be resting if you were in the rear bench seat. Now, as you can see, there's a lot of scale rust here. It doesn't completely go through the sheet metal. I don't know how deep it is. I'm going to go ahead and sand this down in a future video. I think this is salvageable, but we're going to go ahead and find out. Now, the one thing you will notice, like right here, this is a cover for one of those body access mounts that I was telling you about. In my case, 3 out of the 4 of these access panels are in pretty poor condition, so I will be ordering a replacement for 3 of them. The one on the rear passenger side of the vehicle is actually in excellent conditions. Everything in this intersection here is very good condition. It becomes less of a good condition when you get back into the corners here. It is possible that I may have to go ahead and cut these portions out, but I'm going to sand it down first to kind of see if that's the case. It's pretty much the same state, although not quite as bad on the passenger side, closer to where the camera is. Now let's go ahead and take a look at the front area where the driver and the passenger will be placing their feet. Okay, I'm going to stay out of this portion of the video just so there's more room for you to see. What you're looking at right now is the passenger side foot space area. So as you can see, this is an area that indeed there are rust holes that go all the way through the sheet metal. However, after I cleaned everything out, I can say it is still a better condition than I thought it was going to be in. So there's going to be a little bit of this portion that's cut out, but not nearly as bad as I thought. Now it does look like there is a slight deformity that may have to be pounded into place, but we'll take a look at that when we get to that point of body work. Overall, not as bad condition on this side as I thought. Now let's go ahead and take a look at the driver's side. All right, here we are now on the driver's side of the vehicle. Much like the passenger side of the vehicle, there is rust that goes completely through the body. That area is going to have to be cut out. However, it's not as bad as I thought before we cleaned the vehicle out. In fact, I'm going to say of this entire section of the vehicle, probably only about 20% of it has to be cut out. The rest of it can be sanded down. So this is looking in pretty good condition, and overall I think the vehicle is in a much better state than I thought it was going to be in. Okay, so now that we've got this vehicle mostly cleaned out, it's kind of changed my perception of what's going to happen in future videos. So I still do need to do things like getting the door panels off. Back here, there's the attachments for the male end of the front seat belts that I need to kind of get that off as well. I do want to go ahead and sand down everything, especially the scaled rust. However, because of the amount of infestation from mice that had happened in this vehicle, I'm going to have to prioritize getting the seats at the very minimum stripped down, because there probably is stuff inside of the seat cushions that you don't want there. I don't want to just store that in the garage. So that's going to be coming up sooner rather than later. In addition, I will take the action, and I'll probably film a video for it, of putting all of the bolts, nuts, screws, everything that came out of this vehicle in the ultrasonic cleaner, get those completely cleaned off so they can be reused. I will probably also go ahead and spray those down with a modern rust protective coating that should also make it easier to screw those back in and unscrew them if necessary. So that'll be coming up in future videos. I do look forward to them, and I look forward to sharing those videos with you. Again, my name is John Webb, and this is Have Bronco Will Travel.